Good day, everyone. For teleSUR, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. A highly anticipated report on the Colombian conflict written by a commission of experts is expected to be released today. Now, the experts were appointed by both the FARC guerrilla and the Colombian government as part of the nation's ongoing peace dialogue. The 700-page report sheds light on the historical aspects of the armed conflict and aims to provide a basis to implement new measures to help avoid repeating mistakes that led to the outbreak of the conflict. A little background now on the armed conflict in Colombia. It began shortly after a civil war between conservatives and liberals, which took place in the 1940s and 1950s. Manuel Marulanda, the historical leader of the FARC, founded the Marxist guerrilla organization in 1964 after abandoning the Liberal Party. Official figures place the conflict's victims at 6.8 million. This includes kidnappings, assassinations, disappearances, extortions, and other forms of victimization. 230,000 people have died as a result of the conflict. Human rights violations committed by paramilitary forces account for almost 70% of total abuses. The current peace process underway in Havana, Cuba began in 2012. The Mexican government rejected late on Monday the conclusions of an Argentinian forensics team accompanying the investigation of the 43 Ayotzinapa missing students. The Mexican Attorney General's office issued a statement rejecting the claims made by the Argentinian experts, dismissing them as speculations. The Argentinians concluded that the human remains found in Cocula, alleged to be those of the missing students, were mishandled by authorities, casting new doubt over the government's conclusions. Also in Mexico, we go to our correspondent Clayton Kahn for an update on a labor struggle between teachers and the federal government.
Early this morning at around 3:30, a mass sit-in of dissident teachers that was located on Mexico City's iconic Reforma Avenue was moved to the city center's Revolution Plaza as part of negotiations with federal authorities over salaries. The decision comes after Mexico City and federal riot police encircled and threatened the encampment that was installed on Monday afternoon that stretched over 10 blocks. The teachers of the Democratic National Coordinator of Education Workers had previously tried to take the historic Zocalo Square, but were denied access by a mass police operation. The roughly 4,000 teachers participating in the mass action have come to the capital to negotiate with federal authorities over teacher salaries, as well as to express their rejection towards an education reform implemented last year that they say is a push to privatize the education system and attack teachers' labor rights. It was a bit over a year ago when the same union of teachers were brutally and violently evicted from an encampment installed in the Zocalo Square. This is Clayton Kahn reporting for teleSUR here in Mexico City.
Investigations into the death of Argentinian attorney Alberto Nisman continue to reveal the questionable circumstances surrounding the controversial case. A new DNA sample was found at Nisman's house, which does not belong to him or his relatives. Investigators will now call upon different suspects to find the matching DNA. The authorities believe former intelligence agents were involved in Nisman's death in order to discredit the government of President Cristina Fernandez. The United States has announced it will give $1 billion to Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador to help stem the tide of immigration of unaccompanied minors. It's calling the plan the Alliance for Prosperity. But as Gerardo Torres reports from Tegucigalpa, many believe it follows in the footsteps of John F. Kennedy's counterinsurgency plans of the 1960s, known as the Alliance for Progress.
Historically, the United States has maintained a strong presence in Central America using military power and money. Recently, the United States government announced the creation of the Alliance for Prosperity, a new version of Kennedy's and then Reagan's Alliance for Progress that spent millions of dollars controlling political opposition instead of getting people out of poverty. This year, security aid programs and foreign investments are its main goals.
The Alliance for Progress took place during the Cold War. The idea was that the Central American countries, with the help of the United States and with the help of capitalism, could live well, in contrast to the negative Soviet model. And today the United States continues to enter into Latin America.
This new alliance means a fund of $1 billion to Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. Last week, a delegation of the Anti-Corruption Party of Honduras visited the United States to demand a transparent use of this money.
This could be beneficial if the money isn't used for political campaigning or invested behind closed doors. I think that if the $300 million were to be used correctly, it will help the efforts of the central government.
But for Joseph Malta, who is an expert in human development world programs, this alliance has other goals.
Today they have dragged 3 countries into the alliance, and I believe that they will attempt to show that they have a positive strategy. If they add 5 more countries, they could have a parallel force against ALBA, CELAC, and all the other new initiatives. That means that behind this, there is more than the announced objectives.
It appears that the United States has decided to go back to the strategy they had in the region during the Cold War. Gerardo Torres, teleSUR, Central America.
And that Alliance for Prosperity is one item on the agenda as the presidents of El Salvador and Honduras meet in San Salvador. Juan Orlando Hernandez and Salvador Sanchez Seren will also be discussing border issues. Gerardo Torres also has this update.
The Honduran President Juan Hernandez is today in El Salvador for an official visit to President Salvador Sanchez Seren. Both presidents will discuss bilateral cooperation and economic development projects, particularly in the Gulf of Fonseca, which both countries share in the Pacific coast with Nicaragua. An important theme over the table is the discussion of the disputed island of El Conejo, which both countries claim as their own, and that constantly produces military tensions that affect the fishermen of both countries. The presidents will discuss the beginning of the Alliance for the Prosperity Project, that is an initiative of the United States that will give $1 billion of aid to Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras to try to stop the immigration flow of minors to the United States. This afternoon, the both President Hernandez and Sanchez Seren will hold a joint press conference to talk about the results of this meeting. Gerardo Torres, teleSUR, Central America.
The government of St. Lucia is has hoped to implement universal health care for a while now. It has been proposed since 2000, but as our correspondent Allison Kenchis reports, it is not yet a reality for the Caribbean island.
Universal health care is a campaign promise of the ruling St. Lucia Labour Party. The government says every citizen, regardless of their income level, should have access to affordable, quality health care. The government's chief health planner says citizens have been clamoring for this type of care.
We spoke with every single community, and one thing that every community said to us was that they really do need a safety net for health care. They need to know that when their children are sick, when their family is sick, that they will not be out of pocket, they will not be unable to act with respect to a health issue that they will be experiencing. This is what the government has taken really seriously. The government has listened to the voice of the people, and the Universal Health Coverage Initiative really represents our response to what the people of St. Lucia really said they needed.
Patients like Phil de Beauville believe universal health care could put St. Lucia on par with countries which boast the highest quality of care.
Well, it could be improved. I lived in America for 23 years, so this is no healthcare system compared to what I'm used to. Because there are a lot of things, there are a lot of shortcomings there. Okay? So anything for improvement, yes.
Health officials say the key factor to improving access to healthcare and offering quality service to people is the resolution of the issue of the cost of healthcare. They say too many St. Lucians cannot afford to pay the cost of that service, and government is facing this issue squarely and hopes to resolve it once and for all. Health officials say the goal of this program is to ensure that no one in need of care is denied access to quality health services. From Castries, St. Lucia, Alison Kentish for teleSUR English.
Representatives of the Ukrainian government and pro-Russian rebels have begun talks in Belarus a day before the leaders of France, Germany, Russia, and Ukraine arrive for a peace summit. The meetings in Minsk come as fighting between the two sides intensifies, and after France, Germany, and Russia discussed a new peace initiative last week. One key proposal is for a demilitarized zone in southeastern Ukraine. More than 5,000 lives have been lost since the conflict began last year. And even as the talks in Minsk began, the eastern Ukrainian city of Kramatorsk was hit by rocket fire, which killed at least 6 people. The renewed shelling is part of an offensive launched by the Ukrainian military to guard the city of Mariupol as rebel forces make important gains in the northeast of the country. U.S. President Barack Obama rejected late on Monday the planned visit by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Obama confirmed he will not meet Netanyahu and criticized his decision to deliver a speech to Congress after he was invited by Republican Speaker of the House John Boehner. The Israeli Prime Minister will try to dissuade Washington from continuing the ongoing nuclear talks with Iran. And while Netanyahu contemplates his next political move, Palestinians are demanding that borders remain open in order to continue the flow of humanitarian aid to Gaza. Noor Harazin has this report.
On Monday, Israeli authorities opened the Kerem Shalom goods border with Gaza, allowing several food and humanitarian aid trucks to enter the coastal enclave. The goods will be distributed to families in need and affected by Israel's war on Gaza last year. Hamas officials in Gaza have called on the international community to pressure Israel into keeping the Kerem Shalom border open constantly to help provide more supplies to the residents of Gaza. However, the Israeli authorities keeps it closed for almost 4 days a week. In the West Bank, tension between Palestinians and Israeli forces has escalated again when Palestinian protesters clashed with the IDF in several areas following the latest Israeli decision to expand the settlements.
The situation in the West Bank will continue to escalate as long as Israel keeps violating its agreements and forces the Palestinian people into fighting for their rights. More illegal settlements are being built, which means more Palestinian land is being taken and occupied.
On Sunday, Israeli authorities approved the construction of 93 new settlement units to be built in Ramat Shalomo settlement, which is located in the Palestinian-occupied city of Holy Jerusalem. According to the Palestinian human rights organizations, there is over 500,000 Israeli settlers living in settlements across the West Bank, which violates international law as well as the Palestinian-Israeli Oslo agreements. Noor Harazin, teleSUR TV.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad says his government is getting information about the U.S.-led airstrikes against the Islamic State from third parties, including Iraq. The Syrian leader said there is no direct cooperation with the U.S. Washington has rejected working together with Syria, so both countries have been waging their own separate campaigns against the Islamic State. Assad says his forces have received information on U.S. airstrikes against ISIL but refused to give details. Also in Syria, a UN envoy has arrived for a new round of peace talks between the government and the opposition. We go to our correspondent Nashwan Abdullah.
The UN Special Envoy to Syria, Staffan de Mistura, arrived in Damascus in a new round of talks between the Syrian government and opposition blocs. According to a source in the government, de Mistura will meet the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and numerous other politicians from both opposition and government sides. The UN envoy stated from Munich Security Conference over the weekend that while the United Nations is doing all it can to bring some necessary confidence, the link between the Syrian parties is hindering this. Various media sources are talking that de Mistura will offer a modified version of his peace plan, which he presented in October 2014, which could see a ceasefire in numerous areas. Nashwan Abdullah, teleSUR, Damascus, Syria.
And moving on, Niger's parliament approved sending troops to back a full-scale offensive launched by Nigeria against the Boko Haram group. The Nigerian military says it will root out the group before elections. Nigerian authorities postponed general elections to March 28th after violent attacks launched by the terrorist organization. A new collection of controversial Chinese artist Ai Weiwei will go on auction Thursday in London. The zodiac heads, a set of 12 bronze sculptures corresponding to each of the Chinese zodiac animals, is expected to set a record price. It will sell at an estimated 2 to 3 million pounds. The collection will be auctioned in the renowned Phillips Auction House. And Brazilian Samba schools are getting ready for the Rio de Janeiro Carnival. These schools are rehearsing ahead of the symbolic parade. Now, the event marks the most important competition for local Samba schools. One of Brazil's most important Carnival, the Rio Carnival, will begin next week. The Chilean documentary The Pearl Button by filmmaker Patricia Guzman drew applause from viewers and critics at the Berlin Film Festival in Germany. The film depicts the history of Chile using water as a metaphor, starting with the genocide of the native peoples of the Patagonia region all the way through the crimes of the Pinochet dictatorship. Guzman is also the creator of the classic documentary The Battle of Chile. Plenty more on those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English for teleSUR English. I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great Tuesday.